Who's preaching today?
Our lesson this morning is on humility. It stems from the lesson that Jesus gave his disciples on humility. And it talks a lot about children and childlike behavior. And what makes y'all think that humility is childlike? What are the qualities that children have that adults don't necessarily, even though they have them, they don't necessarily manifest them?
Innocence, I think of first of all.
Yeah. No preconceived ideas about things. Most of the time, children, what comes up comes out. And
No
a lot of
filters.
times it's extremely profound, even though we don't necessarily think they have that depth of perception sometimes, but they do. And they repeat a lot of things, of course.
They don't have any status.
Yeah,
That's
that's
true.
They-
And
until they hit the adolescent years, they more or less treat everyone more or less the same.
yeah,
That's why you get these all
and
these
and they
little-
have a instinctual knowledge of who they can trust and who they can't. Most of the time. Sometimes that doesn't always work, but generally. And I think that the fact that children were always around Jesus is an example of how that they knew they could trust him. And there's several definitions of humility. One is the fear of the Lord. And when I think of fear of the Lord, I do not think of a scary fear. I think more of respect and belief than fear. Humble people care about others first. They're servants, and they don't care who gets the credit. That's the definition of humility. And the simple definition of humble is showing a modest or low estimate of one's own importance. And I think children don't understand importance when they're little. So I think that's one of the reasons that Jesus uses them as an example for humility. So let's read our lesson. It comes from Matthew 18, 1 through 9. At the time the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" He called a child whom he put among them and said, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever becomes humble like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever welcomes one such child in your name welcomes me. If any of you put a stumbling block before one of these little ones who believe in me, it would be better for you if a great millstone was fastened around your neck and you were drowned in the depth of the sea. Woe to the world because of stumbling blocks. Occasions from stumbling blocks are bound to come, but woe to the one by whom the stumbling block comes. If your hand or your foot causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life maimed or lame than to have 2 hands and 2 feet to be thrown into eternal fire. And if your eyes causes you to stumble, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life with 1 eye than to have 2 eyes and to be thrown into the hell of fire. I think as many times in the past, Jesus was using these examples as metaphor. I don't think he was telling the disciples that they needed to cut their foot off or cut their hand off or pluck out their eye. I think he was telling them that they need to look at what the stumbling block is and cast it aside so that not just the children, but all of us are able to become closer to God. The narrative about, back in Matthew, there's a story about him healing an epileptic boy. Raises the question of why adult disciples could not heal him. Because of your little faith, Jesus replied. The parable of the lost sheep considers the importance of mission and the search for those who are lost. And I know you remember that story he told about when a shepherd has 100 sheep and one gets lost. He leaves the others and goes and finds that lost sheep. That's an example of what Jesus did his whole life. He put himself in the middle of the leopards and healed them. He wasn't afraid. He didn't allow that disease to be a stumbling block for him. And he always said, let the little children come to me. Do not stop them. For it is to such as these that the kingdom of heaven belongs. Again, I think he's talking about children of God and those of us who are fortunate enough to have received his blessings and are humble enough to accept them and know that he is the Almighty God, and that he gave several examples of how to be humble in his own examples. Washing of the disciples' feet was one of them, and he frequently says, you can't be a servant. You can't have a servant unless you be a servant. You know, and the servant has to be, you have to be the servant of God. And always remember that we are on this earth to promote Christianity and to go forward with what we believe. And I thought about, well, how do you really do that? And then I came across some examples of how to be humble. And one is to listen to others. My mother used to tell me God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, so be quiet and listen. I think we all fall short of that. Sometimes we get so wrapped up in the conversation, we're so busy trying to figure out what we're going to say next, that we don't really listen to what people are saying. And to be humble is to present yourself and place yourself in a position where you truly can listen and practice mindfulness and focus on the present, and be grateful for what you have. Ask for help when needed. Seek feedback from others. It's not enough to invite somebody to church. Maybe the approach is, oh, what can I do to help you get there? Do you need a ride? Can I come pick you up? Be a little more forceful in our actions, but still being humble around those that we're trying to serve. And always review your actions against the language of pride. I know y'all know pride goeth before a fall, and that
It's the I conversation versus the you conversation.
absolutely. And one of the things that the only time I know when the I conversation is good is when you're trying to explain something to somebody or help them do their behavior actions differently. You skip the you and you talk about I
Yes.
feel like this,
Yes.
and et cetera. So that's, to me, the only time the I conversation is ever really is really ever,
When you feel someone is doing something that's not acceptable,
yeah,
telling them you're doing that wrong turns
Yeah.
them off. But if you're saying what you're doing makes me uncomfortable, or what you're doing is interrupting other people,
yeah.
is
And when
I
Jesus,
feel
yeah, and when Jesus takes the child into the folds where the disciples were, and told them that they needed to be more childlike in order to enter the kingdom of heaven. Um, and this humility concept is very important throughout the Bible, and it speaks to the self-effacing attitude in which people rarely blow their own horns. They think of others before self and depend on God's power instead of their own. And I think that we all, in our minds, want to be that way. I don't know that we always succeed, but it's, and how do you get humility? Um, Jesus teaches that we must become like children if you want to enter. Humility something we learn through practice, or text amplifies, or is it given by God like the gift of the Spirit? What do y'all think? How do you get to be humble?
I think to the extent that it requires you to have a certain degree of self-knowledge, it may be a gift of the Spirit. I think until God wakes you up, and I mean, I don't think it's natural for most people to think, well, I'm being prideful here.
I think Matthew 11:29 tells us very succinctly. Jesus said, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." He told the disciples, take a lesson from me. Watch what I do and be with me. And in Mark, what I'm supposed to read, 10:49. Mark, he says, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles, Lord is over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you, you must be your servant. And whoever wants to first, wait a minute, I'm getting mixed up here. You know that you are regarded as rulers of the Gentile lorded over them, and their high officials exercise authority over him. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be the slave to all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. And I just think that Jesus' example is how we learn to become humble and to be Christian-like. And it's to follow Jesus and to be like Jesus and to go forward and present things in your life to so that you can bring people into with God, but do it as a way that makes them feel welcome and wanted and encouraged to be like you, because you are trying to be like Jesus. And I think that pretty well sums up what this lesson is telling us. Be more like Jesus. Follow You can't become humble and then boast about it. That doesn't work. It's just, the Christian life, as our author says, is one that turns the world's standards upside down. The greatness to which one is aspired is not measured in such things as power, influence, and money. One is to submit to lowliness, scorn, poverty, humility, and service. For Matthew, the church must be determined by the principle of littleness, forgiveness, and love. And where does that leave us? You know, we still have stumbling blocks. And we need to learn how to cast them away. And that's pretty much what I had to say about the lesson today. But Carol sent me this, and this is the truest example of humility among people that we know. And I'm just going to read the whole thing. It's only a page. Admittedly, when asked to call to mind a memorable example of humility and respect, most of us wouldn't immediately think of the glitzy television award show. However, the 1997's Emmys included an award acceptance speech that embodies both practices. It was when Fred Rogers accepted the Lifetime Achievement Award. Recognized for his decades-long work with children, guiding them in how to be kind, compassionate, honest, and humane, the creator and host of public television's Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood accepted the award with a smile and these words: "All of us have special ones who have loved us into being. Would you just take, along with me, 10 seconds to think of the people who helped you become who you are?" 10 seconds of silence. As seconds ticked by, the surprised audience followed his invitation, setting aside their self-importance and silently thinking of someone else for caring enough to make a difference in their life. The 10 seconds pause, and after Fred Rogers said a few words to thank those who loved him into being and loved his neighborhood into being, he said, "May God be with you," and left the stage. In his gentle, unassuming way, this man turned the focus away from himself and the work he cherished. He used his time on the stage to honor the works of everyone in the audience and those who loved him. Mr. Rogers was and is more than a sweet character on a beloved children's show. He was an ordained Presbyterian minister who believed in and worked every day to emulate a Jesus who welcomes children, loves us just the way we are, and calls us to love self and neighbors. Like Jesus did, he noticed and valued the look over, the ignored, the unappreciated like Jesus did. He embraced and encouraged the voicelessness and powerless. When Jesus' disciples asked him, "Who is the greatest in heaven?" Jesus celebrated the witness of a child, saying, "Whoever becomes humble like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me." Too often we allow fear and anxiety to blind us and bind us. We can become alienated from each other and from the love and peace that God freely offers us. Let us follow Jesus' call for respect and care. We are neighbors. We are family. We can reach out to each other in humility and with respect and trust each other to do the same. As Maya Angelou said, humility comes from inside out. It says, someone was here before me, and I am here because I have been paid for. I have something to do, and when I do that, because I'm paying for someone else who has yet to come, which, to me, examples Jesus coming and giving his life for us. And in the simplest words I know how to say, we are charged with paying it forward. And I thank you for this article. It was just a perfect way for me to end this lesson. Except we do have a prayer, don't we? Dear God, help us to learn the difference between being childlike and childish. Amen.
I'm reminded of the story of Thomas Aquinas, if you've ever attempted to read him, very, very deep theologian. But he was considered absent-minded and silly by the people in his monastery. And one day they came to him and said, "Did you see? Some of the pigs are flying." And he immediately ran to the window to look out of the pigsty to see if the pigs are flying, and they were laughing at him. And he turned back to them and he said, "I would rather believe that pigs fly than that my brothers would lie to me."
Oh.
Talk about a burn.
Do you want this back?
Sure.
Okay, Steve, you're up next.
Next week.
So far, I like the lessons in this
Yeah.
They're very good.
quarterly thing. I didn't finish filling this out.
It looks like it may have stopped raining.
It's gonna rain off and on all day.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Good morning, good morning.